Stephen Clancy Hill was born on May 8, 1976 in Riverdale Park, Maryland. His parents got divorced when he was young, and he moved with his mother to live in Washington, D.C. They resided in a poor black neighborhood, and according to his father David, Stephen was bullied relentlessly in school, partially because of his lighter complexion and slim build. They eventually moved back to Maryland, with Stephen visiting his dad each summer in Florida. During his junior year of high school, he joined the Air Force's Junior ROTC program in the hopes of one day becoming a pilot. It was this military training that got Stephen interested in firearms and weapons. He planned to attend the University of Maryland to sign up for their ROTC program. While his father wasn't opposed to this decision, he didn't believe he would be recruited due to his physical ailments. He had metal plates inserted into his arm after a basketball injury, and his eyesight facilitated the need for glasses, which he strangely refused to wear. His father claimed that he believed he could use willpower to improve his vision. Stephen was accepted at UMD, where he struggled heavily with his classes as well as his flight instructions, leading to his rejection by the ROTC while in his sophomore year. During his senior year, on October 12, 1998, Hill entered the office of teaching assistant Alvaro Alvarez Perea, asking for extra time to complete a math test. When his request was denied, he lifted his jacket to reveal a holstered handgun. He threatened that if the instructor didn't give him an A, he would make him disappear, asking him, "What's more important to you, giving me an A or your life?" This threat was reported to the school's administration, and during a traffic stop 2 days later, Stephen was found with a loaded gun and 3 magazines full of ammunition in his car. He was taken into custody, and after psychological evaluation, was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. During his trial, Stephen claimed that he only threatened the instructor after he asked him for oral sex, which the instructor outright denied. Stephen was convicted of second-degree assault as well as firearm charges and was initially sentenced to 5 years in prison, which was later changed to 18 months of house arrest. It was during his sentence that Stephen began mail ordering and watching large amounts of pornography. His dad claimed that he racked up over $20,000 in credit card bills, which he neglected to pay back. Once he was released from house arrest, he tried holding down jobs in the mortgage title industry, but was laid off multiple times for his bad credit and criminal history. In December 2006, he moved into an apartment in Los Angeles and told his father he wanted to become an actor. In reality, he pursued work as a porn star and adopted the pseudonym Steve Driver. He started out his newfound career as a mope, a term used in the industry to describe a low-level male performer. In a strange attempt to differentiate himself, he created a gimmick he called Monster Hands. According to a set photographer, quote, he would wear these hands like from a Halloween costume. He'd jack off a girl with the hands, and when he'd come, he'd yell, "Monster Hands." It was ridiculous. Stephen soon befriended another mope, Herbert Wong, who went by the screen name Tom Dong. Stephen provided transportation for him, and in return, he was able to secure some roles for him, one of which included the role of Barack Obama in a spoof titled Palin, Erection 2008. The pair worked on several projects together and were considered somewhat of a package deal, with one director calling them the Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan of porn. In 2009, Eric Jover, the owner of the pornography studio Ultima DVD, met with Wong and offered him a job at the studio. Wong gave his recommendation to hire Stephen as well, which Jover accepted. Both men were provided room and board in exchange for performing in the studio's fetish productions. However, it soon became apparent to many of Stephen's colleagues, including Jover, how much of a nuisance he was to work with. Perhaps their most common complaint concerned his poor hygiene. Most of the studio's actresses despised working with him because of his body odor. One of them recalled an occasion where Stephen offered to drive her to a shoot, but she got out of his car only a mile into the trip because of how bad it smelled inside. Jover installed a shower at the studio to attempt to remedy this problem, but according to him, they couldn't get the funk out. Jover also remarked that Stephen owed several people large amounts of money. Quote, he owed a buddy of mine quite a bit of money and he'd been dodging the guy for a while. There was one time when he visited the studio and Steve thought he was trying to sabotage him. Out of nowhere, Steve just ran into the room and punched the guy in the face. Tom and I had to hold Steve back. I had to try to talk to my friend to not call the cops. Sometime in 2010, Stephen was involved in another incident at a university, this time at the California State University. He often disguised himself as a student there so he could use the computers at the school's library. That day, he sent his father David an email saying he was going to kill himself and take several people with him. Concerned by the message, David alerted the police, who apprehended him on campus. They found several swords inside his vehicle, and though nobody was attacked, he was held in police custody for 3 days to be mentally evaluated. LAPD detective Joel Price stated that while in custody, he had an email conversation with his father discussing his 34th birthday. David reportedly made an offhanded comment that he was 34 when Stephen was born. This comment seemed to make Stephen depressed, who said he felt bad about not having a wife and family of his own. This would be the last time that Stephen ever talked with his father. Because of Stephen's recent behavior and run-ins with the law, Jover ultimately fired him during the spring of 2010. He gave him some money to help him find another place to stay, but after 4 weeks had passed and Stephen hadn't left the premises, Jover threatened to have him evicted. A few days later, on June 1st, studio manager Christopher Rachel came to confront Stephen, who was on his couch watching the movie Kingdom of Heaven. He pestered him to sit down and watch the movie with him, which he did reluctantly. As he sat down, Stephen reached behind the couch and pulled out a samurai-style aluminum machete prop that he had sharpened to a point. He swung the weapon into Rachel's left shoulder, which almost cut his arm off. Rachel attempted to defend himself with a prop hospital bed, but Stephen climbed over it and raised his sword to swing at him again. Rachel grabbed the sword with his right hand, which cut into it so deep that his tendons were visible. That's when 3 men burst into the room: Herbert Wong, Eric Jover, and a nearby business neighbor, Yuri Drell. They all tried to defuse the situation, but once Stephen noticed the men trying to call the police, he charged towards them. Drell was able to quickly escape outside of the building, but ran back inside when he heard Wong screaming. He found him lying on the ground and bleeding everywhere. He was cut at the waist and his elbow was cut to the bone. He was turning purple. Drell got into a brief scuffle with Stephen, where he suffered a wound to his shoulder. Stephen then chased after Jover outside the building for several yards. He got into his SUV and tried to run him over before fleeing the scene of the crime. The 3 men injured in the attack, Drell, Rachel, and Wong, were all rushed to the Northridge Hospital Medical Center. The next day, Wong was pronounced dead due to internal injuries and blood loss. Rachel was treated for the injuries to his arm and hand, and Drell had to get 23 stitches for the wound to his shoulder. A manhunt soon began for Stephen Hill. The website for Ultima DVD posted a $2,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. It wasn't until 3 days after the attack that someone reported seeing Stephen's SUV on a property in the West Hills neighborhood. The following day, authorities discovered him hiding out on said property, which prompted the SWAT team to create a barricade around the home. Stephen escaped and climbed a nearby cliff, where it was discovered he was still wielding the sword he used in his attack. As police moved in, he threatened to stab himself by holding the blade against his chest while standing at the edge of the cliff. Crisis negotiators arrived and attempted to negotiate with him for nearly 8 hours, even tossing water bottles to Stephen as they conversed with him. At about 5:30 p.m., with little progress being made, police were ready to end the standoff. They surrounded Stephen at the edge of the cliff, armed with less than lethal weapons, including tasers and beanbag guns. At least 2 officers fired these guns at Stephen, who immediately leapt from the edge of the cliff, plummeting over 40 feet to the ground below. Television crews were able to capture Stephen's fall on camera, as well as paramedics carrying him to an ambulance. About 2 hours later, the Los Angeles Police Department confirmed that Stephen Clancy Hill was dead at the age of 34.